From my kitchen to yours, food from the heart. This pumpkin and sage ravioli with sage butter is super silky and elegant, and it's great when the pumpkins are abundant in the garden. So let's start with the pumpkin. So I've got about 400 grams of butternut. I love butternut pumpkin. The great thing is I quite often make soup out of this, and I don't even have to worry to peel it, because when you whiz it all up, you're getting all the goodness of the skin, but it actually blends up really nicely and gives you plenty of goodness in there. Now I've just drizzled some olive oil, lots of pepper, salt, and we're just going to pop this in the oven for about 30 minutes on 180. So the pumpkin's been cooking for about 35 minutes in the oven, and see how there's all those lovely caramelized bits. That's what we're looking for. And the reason why I actually roast it in the oven rather than boiling or cooking it in the microwave is that I want that reduction. I want the pumpkin to caramelize. I want the moisture to come out of it so it intensifies in flavor, so you're really getting that sweet pumpkin flavour coming through in your ravioli. We'll pop it into a bowl, and in this case we're not going to use the skin. So I'm just going to scoop the pumpkin out. Try and get as much as you can off the skin. We're going to add 150 grams of goat's cheese. Now that's going to give you the bite, which is just such a lovely contrast. You've got the sweetness of the pumpkin, and then the bitey piquancy of the goat's cheese is just really a marriage made in heaven. About 100 grams of grated Parmesan cheese, a little bit of nutmeg. Don't go overboard because it is quite a strong aromatic, but just that little bit just makes all the difference. And then we'll give it a mix. And I've got the pot of water there on the stove, so it's ready to go when we're ready to cook our raviolis. If your pumpkin, for some reason, if you don't roast it, if you do end up just needing to quickly put it in the microwave or boil it up really quickly, if your mix is a little bit wet, a great trick is just to add half a handful of fresh breadcrumbs, because it'll just soak up the moisture a little bit. Now I'm going to have a little taste, because I want to see if the goat's cheese is quite salty. We won't need to season. It needs salt, a little pinch, and a little bit more pepper. And another important thing to remember is whenever I'm filling pasta like ravioli, I never overmix, because you want to come across that lovely little bit of goat's cheese or that lovely sweet bit of pumpkin. You just don't want it all to be one big sort of mush like you might find in a commercially made pasta. So as you can see, here we have it, our beautiful pumpkin and goat's cheese ravioli filling. Today for our ravioli, we're using these egg wonton wrappers. We're just going to lay them down on our bench. I'll make about 12, I think, today to start. And I think as an entree, 4 of these are really, really nice. And then half a dozen to 8 as a main course. Now for the filling. So don't overfill, because you don't want the mix to spill out. You need plenty of room around the outside to pop your top layer on. Okay, now that looks so pretty just on the bench. Okay, now we're going to beautify with our lovely sage that I picked this morning from my garden. Very lucky to have the herb garden right at my kitchen door here at Essington. So I like to pop a little bit of sage on the top of each ravioli, and hopefully when we cook them, you'll be able to see the sage come through the ravioli and it'll look really pretty. Okay, now we need an egg, just one lovely Essington Park egg. Give that a little mix. We're going to brush this egg wash along about 1 or 2 centimetres along each ravioli. Looks like a painting. The egg's going to help that top pasta stick. Okay, there we are. Okay, and then for the topping. So it's quite important that we push the top pasta down, and probably best not to do any more at one time than what I'm doing here now, because you don't want your egg wash to dry out, because the whole idea of that is to have the top layer of your pasta sticking. Okay, and then what I do is I pick each one up and give it a little squeeze like that, and just make sure that all the air has come out. You can get it to this point and then freeze them, or when you're making them, make it extra and pop in the freezer. And you can actually take your ravioli straight from the freezer and cook in your boiling water. We're ready to cook. So important, the water needs to be really boiling, a little bit of salt. We're just going to cook these until they come up to the surface. And I never overcrowd, because you need to give them lots of room to float around and do their thing. I'll give the water a little swirl so they don't catch on the bottom. That's quite important to keep an eye on them. Okay, so these lovely little darlings are ready, and I'm just going to scoop them out with my trusty little strainer and just slide onto a platter. Try and get rid of as much water as you can, and in with the remaining 6. Just make sure your water is sort of swirling around. Make sure that your water is always ticking along nicely. You've got that little tick, that little simmer happening. Otherwise they will sink down and hit the bottom. See, they've all risen to the top, so you know that they're ready. You don't want to overcook. Remember, your punky, it's already cooked, so that's not what we're aiming for. We're just aiming for that very light cook of your pasta sheet. And there we are, ready for our beautiful butter and sage sauce. Now it's time for the plating up. So I've just had the ravioli just tucked away there in an oven where I've just had the pilot light on so that it just stays nice and warm. But now we're going to make our beautiful butter and sage sauce. Turn the fire down to about halfway, and in with about 150 grams of the good stuff, butter. And just regulate your heat. This does take a little bit of finessing. My nana, they had a dairy, and she used to skim the top of the milk and churn her own butter. So when I'm taking in this aroma, that's the memory, the beautiful memory. Okay, so we're just letting that tick along. I'll turn the fire up a tiny little bit, and we're going to throw in a nice handful of fresh sage. So there's a very fine line when you're making a nut brown butter, because you know you can just take it that little bit too far where you've got that bitterness in a burn. So you're just really looking for that kind of, well, that's why they call it nut brown, that nut brown colour and the crispiness of your sage. The very minute that butter starts to turn, like now, a sprinkle of salt. That sage is crisping up nicely. and the butter foams all up beautifully. This sauce, you've just really got to get it right because that's all it is. It's simple. It's just butter and sage and a little bit of salt. So fire off, and we're going to plate up. So I say 6 raviolis on each plate. Look how pretty that looks. Very pretty with that little sage garnish. And time for our sauce. And for the final flurry, a little dusting of freshly grated Parmesan. And there we have it, my pumpkin and goat's cheese ravioli with butter and sage sauce. Food from the heart.